I'm sure you're familiar with the pressure all too well now. Leadership wants faster releases, customers seamless experiences, and security teams are scrambling to keep up. Software development today is a race, but every rushed release without security built in is a potential disaster waiting to happen. So, how bad could it be? A single security breach can cost millions, wreck customer trust, and land your company in headlines for all the wrong reasons. But slow down too much and you risk falling behind, losing market share, and frustrating stakeholders. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Insight podcast, where we talk about the ever evolving tech space. And I'm your host, Priya Dayalani. Now, one of the key objectives of any software development project is to build reliable applications that function smoothly and consistently. However, a glitch or failure in an application can have devastating impacts, ranging from financial losses to compromised security and eroded customer trust. Let's welcome Vijendra Katiyar, co founder and CRO at CleanStart, to help us understand how we can build software that can be trusted and why security is a design choice and not just a patch. Hi, Vijendra, how are you doing?
Hi, Priya. I'm good. Thank you so much.
Great. It's a pleasure to have you on a podcast today, Vijendra. And of course, when you talk about software development, there is so much to talk about. But definitely, we are going to focus on the security aspect of the software development field and how we should be advancing in this particular vertical, but with more of accountability and transparency. But before we get and deeper into our conversation, let's tell our listeners more about Clean Start. So if you could tell us more about the company, its specialization, our listeners would love to hear about it.
Sure. We started this company last year in June, July. It's been about close to 18 months since we started. So we have a very fair and in-depth understanding of what are the problems today we face in cybersecurity, especially in last 3, 4 years. We look at this software supply chain, right? So this is emerging to be a very big problem now. Given that every company today is a tech company, every company is building applications. You look at your mobile phone today, and then all the apps we see, whether it is related to your business or your day-to-day life, everything runs through applications, right? And that becomes very important, that how are these applications getting built and how are they getting built securely, right? Because today business is equal to technology. Technology is not just enabler, it is by itself a business, right? And then a larger part of that is applications or softwares. So keeping that in mind, we started the company Clean Start, and the focus was that how do we make sure while companies are building applications and applications are running businesses, how we can give them that start which can make sure that they are completely secured and they don't have to worry about fixing any issues when they are running these applications in production environment, right? And yeah, just focus on doing business. So that is what we do with CleanStart. We are a software supply chain security company giving near zero CV, hardened, compliant container images to make sure your applications are built securely from day zero.
Thank you for that overview, Vijendra. And I'm really glad to understand how Clean Start is not just keeping pace with industry change, but actively shaping it through innovation and deep domain expertise. I mean, with that, I would like to, know more about you, Vijendra. I think under your guidance, Clean Start has launched an industry first AI powered hardened image generation. It's a unique technology that uses AI to create extra secure software versions, making applications safer right from the start, with over 350 unique secure builds already in its portfolio. So, we would like to know more about you, Vijendra. How has your journey been till date, and what exactly is your role at the company today?
Okay, so I'll tell you more about the journey so far, what we have achieved in last 18 months. I am the Chief Revenue Officer, so I take care of sales and marketing. We all three founders, we have a critical role and very well defined. So Nilesh, being the CEO, takes care of investor relationships, take care of the US market, takes care of product development, engineering, along with Biswajit, who is the CTO, who is completely involved in building the product. and working with the engineering team. Today, we have a team of around close to 100, and we have operations in India, in Southeast Asia, and in the US, right? We already serve a Fortune 100 company in the US as our clientele, and we have other, few customers in India which we are already catering to. Right. So the journey has been very interesting. In last 18 months, a lot of time went into building the team and product. And last 6 months, we have started our GTM across different regions, right? And we have got phenomenal response because this is exactly an area which was not touched. The problem was around for almost a decade plus. We all knew that yes, applications have security issues, they have vulnerabilities, and it was very, left at the last minute to take care of it, and that's where we kind of changed the approach, right? And yes, the product is completely built on AI workflows, and that's where we automate everything, right? What is required in terms of giving that clean hardened container images, not only just images, but then we are looking at LLM models, because today companies are also using a lot of LLMs that also comes from open source, and with the security risk, right? So they want somebody to give them assurance that these LLM models are risk-free, they are safe to use, especially they are used in critical infrastructures, right? Like in a banking environment, financial institutions, fintechs, government, right? So, and now everybody's using AI left, right, and center. So I think the infrastructure or the underlying tech which is used to build that has to be, we need to ensure that that is, secured. So we are also taking care of that, right? And 350 images, yes, of course, we already are there. And then in next couple of months, we should be ready with 1,000 plus images, right? Which will cater to more than 90% of the universe. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think, I mean, it's really interesting to see, how particular leadership your role has helped translate the overall vision into measurable outcomes and, along the while also building systems and teams that can scale sustainably. And I think that gives our listeners a really strong sense of, how individual leadership can directly influence organizational growth and innovation. Moving ahead, when we talk about security, I think one breach or one leaked database or even one ransomware attack can destroy customer confidence. If users don't trust your product, they will switch to a competitor that takes security very seriously. But rebuilding that trust is an uphill battle that takes years. So skipping security today means paying for it later, big time, I feel. And every vulnerability you leave unchecked adds to technical debt that makes future updates more expensive, time consuming, and risky. So the longer you wait, the harder it gets to fix. So when we talk about trusted software, what does it actually mean in practical and real world terms?
Okay. So let me take a step back and let's understand when you talk about software, or especially software as a service, what are we talking about, right? Today, typically we see user interfaces, and we feel that everything, what I see is coming from one particular source, but that's not the case. Today, software applications are built from multiple different components, right? And almost 80-90% comes from open source. And gone are the days where we used to write millions and millions and lines and lines of code, right? So that doesn't happen today. Everything is ready-made, available in the open source, and we have excellent contribution coming from all different perspectives when it comes to the community, and it's just growing and growing and growing. So, and that is fueling, at the pace at which we are building applications. So nothing wrong with that. But very important point that when you talk about these components, right, or trusted software, it has to start fundamentally from, and like I say, I ask three questions, right? And if you don't have an answer to three, these components should not be used for building your software. Number one, do you know the source from where your application or software is built? Do you know how that source was built? And can you confidently say that it is not compromised? So if you are not having answers to these three questions, right, then that piece of code or component should not be used for building applications. Now, if you go a little bit more deeper, there are guidelines and there are frameworks for it. right? So we talk about Salsa. So Salsa is a framework which was built by Google and then it was open source and which focuses on how do we ensure that software supply chain securities or supply chain security is taken care, and looking at the trust and governance part, that okay, how do we ensure that the trust and governance is taken care when you're building applications. So which means having a tamper-proof code, which means ensuring that provenance, which means the source is right or authentic, the artifacts are original, and ensuring all of these are taken care, right, while we are building any application. You're building it from the right source, right, which means I'm not using something which is malicious, I'm not using something which is random, and uploaded by somebody in one of the repos and then it is getting consumed for building applications. So today trusted software has a very deeper meaning, right? And there are frameworks for that, and that is what we do in CleanStart. Salsa is a very good, probably, framework to adopt when you're building applications. There is a lot which goes inside Salsa. So there are various different security levels, level 0 to level 3, level 4, level 5, and you get better security, trust, and governance as you go higher. Yeah.
Definitely, Vijendra. And I think it's a very important way that we frame it because trusted software is a term that we hear everywhere today. And what stands out from your response is that trust is no longer just about whether the software works, it's about how responsibly it works, how transparently it operates, and how consistently it delivers value without the unintended consequences. And I think in today's real world environments, software is something that is making decisions that can directly impact, the people, businesses, and even public systems overall. So I think your perspective really highlights that, with the trusted software, it's, that shift is going to define how successful digital platforms are in the years ahead. Moving ahead, so, of course, when you're talking about developing a software, so traditional security, if you talk about the security aspect, it was often defined by rules, reviews, and sign-offs. But that model doesn't scale in fast-moving environments. A platform-based approach reframes security as a product, something teams can use and, not something they have to justify. Now, I think platform-based security means, it's like a security as a product, and the teams and internal service is something that you consume and you don't just comply with. So when you're talking about this, you really need to ensure that security is something that you put it and embed and design it from the start. So this shift also changes how controls are delivered, and a lot of things also come into picture. So I think you often say that security must be designed in and not bolted on. What does that shift in mindset look like for the engineering teams?
Okay. I think that is a very important point, and that's what we do in CleanStart, which is security should not be an afterthought, should not be something which is bolt on, should be rather built in or secure by design. Which means when you are probably thinking about building an application or a software or anything for that matter, I think security is one aspect which should not be left for a later date to be addressed. It should be part of the fabric. So, and when we look at from the engineering aspect, I think this is a practice which is getting adopted. And that's where we say that DevSecOps, right? The sec becomes security becomes part of the whole development of aspect, right? However, I think the approach has to change a little bit more, it has to be evolved, right? While we look at the security aspect. The other thing is that, and I think there are good guidelines, and especially if you have to talk specifically about applications, right? And we have regulators, we have guidelines who are focusing on it that, okay, let's be vigilant, let's understand what is getting consumed, what is getting used, and then just touching bit little bit more on our last conversation, right? Which wherein we spoke about trusted software. I think SBOM has becoming very, very important. So software bill of material is something which now globally it getting mandated. So if you're buying any software from any vendor, one, you can ask you are for an SBOM, and the vendor has to give you an software bill of material, which will tell you from where it was built, what are the versions, etc., etc., what are the licensed components, is there something which is not licensed, etc. Now, When you talk about secure by design, right, this is exactly which you probably can look at right on the day one, right? If I have my tech stack, which I have to build, I need to see that from where I'm getting that tech stack, right? Whether it is container images, packages, libraries. And second thing is to ensure that while I'm using these components, these are all, they're all clean. They're not having any malicious code, right? And we have seen that in last, probably about from Jan to December till date, there have been so many software supply chain attacks, right? The reason for that was, packages were compromised, right? So we have seen two attacks, software supply chain attacks on NPM repos. We have seen recently the one on Docker secrets early in the March GitHub action. So the impact for these kind of attacks are multifold because these packages, libraries are used by not just one, but thousands of organizations. There are thousands and thousands of repos which who are consuming this. So impact becomes multifold. And exactly when you talk about secure by design or security to be built in, this is also an aspect which has to be taken care. While we still talk about DevSecOps, we talk about integrating different tools in the pipeline. I think right at the day one, when you think about building something, this is something which also has to be considered or should be part of your design framework that, okay, I'm going to use components from trusted source, right? For instance, CleanStart, wherein we provide those container images, packages, libraries, models, right, which can be trusted, right? And then going forward, that same trust has to apply to every stage, which means you built on a clean image, then you have clean packages, right? And the runtime, you ensure that you have checks and balances in place to make sure that the entire infrastructure is taken care from the security perspective. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Vijendra. And I think when security is designed in from day one, I think it changes how teams think about architecture decisions or development velocity and even ownership. So I think it's no longer just the security team's problem. It becomes part of how product managers define requirements, how engineers write and review code, and of course, how leadership measures a success. So, I think this kind of proactive security thinking becomes less of a best practice and more of a necessity. Moving ahead, you spoke a lot of about the supply chain development and the role of technology and even the security aspect of it. So I think gone are the days of rigid or box rules with predefined boundaries in terms of ensuring an overall security. With highly manipulative intruders around, it's really the time to weaponize with AI and a more advanced and full-scale frontline hero to work on every micro segment, ensuring better protection and seamless user experience. So all of this is possible with AI. But is it the right approach? How should an enterprise adapt it? And how is AI in a zero trust cybersecurity resilient? So I think recent supply chain attacks have shown that knowing where software comes from matters as much as scanning it. So how do you think organizations should think about building integrity and trust in their software components?
Okay, I think a lot of it has to do with what we spoke earlier, right? So whether you talk about, say, today, there are organizations, teams, they download models from Hugging Face, right? So, and then similarly, there are so many different open repositories from which today they are available, and then you can just keep pulling different components from these repositories, right? So when you talk about how do we kind of ensure that while we keep building these AI, right, and everybody is trying to build that, is it coming from the right authentic source? So a lot of it has to do with the basic fundamentals, Priya, again, right? Again, going back to same principle of, okay, secure by design. Again, going back to same principle of looking at, so I'll tell you something interesting which we are doing, right? And how does it help? So we are coming up with a product which is going to also take care of the other aspect of it, which is, while we keep on building on top of our, clean images or AI models, there are a lot of packages and libraries which will get used. Now, you cannot compete with open source, which means you cannot keep on building millions and millions of packages and libraries. So the other way of looking at it is, how do we kind of ensure that what I'm pulling from these repositories is safe to use, right? So at least I can tell the engineering team that, okay, this is safe to use. So we are building kind of a gateway, right, which will act as a single point of truth, wherein anything which you pull or download from open source, whether it has packages, libraries, will tell you that whether it is safe to be used or not. Say, for instance, looking at whether it is malicious or not, looking at the reputation of the maintainer, so, or the contributor. If I am the contributor, can you trust me, right? Can I be trusted? Looking at how that component or package was made. Was it built from the right authentic source? So going deeper and checking that, validating that source, right? Looking at the drift between two versions, right? If today I'm using an X version, I'm downloading another version, what is the drift or what is the change which I see, right? So multiple different parameters will be checked, and then it will kind of give you an assurance that yes, now this is something which is safe to be used or consumed, rather than no validation and you're just pulling these LLM models or any other component for building, whether it is your AI applications or whether it is your any other application for that matter or software. Yeah.
Definitely, Vijendra. And I think, I mean, when we talk about building integrity, I think we are essentially talking about trust. Knowing exactly where every component comes from, how it was built, who touched it, and whether it has been altered at any point. And I think it's interesting that this shifts the security conversation from being reactive to being very preventive. So instead of, only asking, is this code vulnerable? Organizations need to ask, can we trust this code in the first place? So that's a really important and a fundamental mindset that we need to make. And I think when we talk about supply chain security, it isn't owned by a single tool or a team. It's more like a shared responsibility across teams, developers, even leadership. And I think all of us, need to come together to establish trust as a first class security principle. Moving ahead, I want to touch down on the certain aspects of, the regulators and the policy changes that we need to make in terms of reinforcing trust in the software development space. So, in 2024, Orion, one of the world's leading manufacturers of carbon black material, suffered a costly cyber attack that resulted in losses of approximately $60 million. So usually the organization's cybersecurity posture is to blame, probably outdated security tools, weak access control can go undetected for months or even years. So as boards and regulators ask for evidence rather than assurances, how should security teams rethink what it means to prove software trust?
Okay, so I think Priya, so if you're talking about the preventing again these kind of attacks, right, wherein cyber attacks, we have to see how they have evolved, right? So today, cyber attackers, they don't need access to your organization. So there were days wherein cyber attacks, we had seen that you compromise an email, you do a identity impersonation, you send a spear phishing email, and that's how we used to see the attacks getting originated and then spreading laterally. So it used to take a lot of effort for attackers to do that, but now there is an easy way. Today, attackers just need to poison one of the packages which is getting used, and once I do that, it's like a water hole attack, right? So once I do that, everybody or anybody who is consuming that code or that package will get compromised. So this is how the evolution of cyber attacks have happened. So today, practically for an attacker, I don't need access to anything, right? I don't need access to your organization to attack you or breach. So that's how breaches have started happening, and they are going to become. We have seen few, and they are going to become more and more, sophisticated as we move forward into the next few years. And that is the reason I think Gartner is also stressing on in the report that by 2028, a lot of organizations will adopt an approach to software supply chain security. Right. So very important that I think when we look at this, very important to how are we taking care of the visibility part or how vigilant we are while we build a zero trust framework around the organization. Zero trust framework of within software development also has to happen, and whether it is getting built in house or whether it is my vendor who is getting develop for me. This is how attacks we have seen, and then in and I think today it is very important for us to reassess everything, because I have spoken to a lot of companies wherein development is outsourced to different service providers, and they do application development, and unfortunately they are building it, but then the risk is owned by the organization who is consuming it, right? And there is very little visibility or transparency in terms of how it is getting built. So that aspect also has to be taken care.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it reframes, I think, security as a business enabler rather than just a defensive function. Because I think when trust can be proven with evidence, it builds confidence, not just with the regulators, with customers, partners, and investors as well. So security isn't something that is slowing teams down. I think those it's more about the bad security practices. So when security is something that you just did because you have to, then might as well prepare for the last minute fixes, expensive rework, and compliance nightmares. But when security is built into the development process from the start, your teams move faster, release safer products, and avoid expensive surprises. So I think modern development demands security to be built in, and with automation and AI-driven tools, we can have real-time monitoring that ensures security keeps practice with rapid development cycles. But I think technology alone isn't enough. Thank you so much, Vijendra, for taking out the time and effort to be on a podcast today and helping us understand that when we built in security, so you're converting all of the bad security practices into more efficient ones. You're saving effort, maximizing productivity, and quickly resolving vulnerabilities as they are introduced, or I think even better, avoid introducing them altogether. So, security by design isn't a static state, it's an ongoing commitment to innovation, vigilance, and user trust. Thank you so much, Vijendra, for your time and effort and sharing your insights. And it was lovely chatting with you.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you so much. So, this is for our listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion around security and software development and what are certain things you need to keep in mind in terms of advancing in an era which is driven and ruled by security and tech advancements. Stay tuned for upcoming podcasts, and you can view all our previous podcasts on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.